I'm Ashton Addison from EventChain for Investment Pitch Media and FinTech News Network. And today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Yousif Nur, the founder of Blockchain Blueprint. Yousif, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you for having me, Ashton. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're very welcome. I'd love to kick off the interview with a little bit of background on your story. How did you first get into cryptocurrency? And then how did that lead into founding Blockchain Blueprint?
Well, to give you the very short version, because this is a story that's about 6 or 7 years in the making. So basically, I started off as a journalist, wanted to find different routes because I cut my teeth as being a music journalist predominantly. But I figured I wanted to do something else, and I started watching all these finance TV shows, and suddenly I kept hearing the words Bitcoin and blockchain, but I'm thinking they were one and the same. But after all, that's kind of how we thought it was to begin with, right? I'm sure everyone thought that. But I started going to events, I started writing about it, and the more I got intrigued, and that level kind of picked up more and more and more. I found myself getting far more immersed into it, going down that rabbit hole of what real money was and about how the financial system works. And suddenly I kind of found Bitcoin at the price it was. I think when I first heard of it consciously, I think it was at about £40, which would be about, I don't know how much that would be in Canadian dollars, but about $60 or so US. But I bought it a little bit, and I subsequently lost it and watched it go all the way to the moon. And that's one of my very biggest regrets. And yeah, I think that with other altcoins, they kind of came into the fray the more I kind of went into the space. And there were all sorts such as Dogecoin and Feathercoin or WorldCoin, blah, blah, blah. And as a lot's changed in that space since then. And I think that, more is going to happen because we're still in really early days. Yeah.
Definitely early days. And it's interesting how your story goes from finding out the difference between Bitcoin and the blockchain to now going into all of these altcoins, which there's such a rabbit hole that's so deep that you could go forever because there's thousands of coins. Some of them have more value than others. But and that's really interesting, and we can get into that a little bit later. But I just want to talk a little bit more about Bitcoin and how you started and being a journalist. The portrayal that you're seeing in the media. First of all, you were a journalist before cryptocurrency, and being a journalist in the blockchain industry must be a little bit different. Have you noticed a change in pace or the way that you're portraying your content by now shifting into this super fast-paced industry?
A little bit, but like with anything in time, things change, and you can't really, force anyone to think and act a certain way. It's like that old saying: you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So, so with that in mind, I was exactly the same way. It was Bitcoin back in the day, if we want to kind of put it like that, was associated with hackers and unscrupulous types. But I think to answer your question with journalism, I think it has changed. I think there are far more people, especially because of the 2017 bull run, people think about it differently, and I believe that there has been a shift in people's perception. And largely down to that, I think the way it's been presented to people, it's kind of thought of differently, largely because of that. But I also think the amount of adoption that there's been since then, not just with Bitcoin necessarily, but blockchain projects. I mean, for example, you're starting to see a lot more corporations and companies get much more involved with different use cases in like verification, security, and keeping assets safe, whether they're a large scale blue chip or a small or medium sized business. So as I say, the way that that's been portrayed by the media, and not just necessarily mainstream media, you're starting to see far more media outlets such as yourselves and many other YouTube channels and um, you know, you know, sites dedicated to crypto, such as Cointelegraph, that produce
Hmm.
solely on cryptocurrency and blockchain, and that you wouldn't have thought that would happen maybe 5, 6 years ago. So going back to what I was saying in your previous question, it's still really early days yet, and
Hmm.
the more people such as myself just kind of, and as well as you, I guess, the more we can keep that forward momentum going in terms of people understanding what it is and not um, getting past, well, rather getting past that perception of what blockchain and Bitcoin and Ethereum are, then, we're onto a good thing.
Definitely, I agree. And it seems that although we're still only 10 or 11 years in, there's definitely been a shift in the way that enterprises are starting to adopt the technology or at least become interested in it and bring awareness to it. And I'm curious on your thoughts on the recent economic craziness and the pandemic. And do you think that that's bringing a positive step towards the adoption of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies right now, or possibly more negative?
I think it depends what side of the fence you're on. Largely because there are still people, as I say, that are wanting to kind of get involved at this point because they know everyone can see right now that the market's inflated and
Hmm.
there's going to be no recovery. As I don't want to be all doom and gloom. I'm a natural realist at the same time that things are not looking good. Things are shaping up to be the the worst it's been since 1929. Having said that, there are also massive opportunities to be had, and I
Hmm.
think what will happen is that people are going to catch on to this eventually and think that their money is not safe in a bank,
Hmm.
that it's not safe in bonds where they first go to as a kind of safe haven or sanctuary for their money and find out that they're getting negative interest rates. So with that, for people rather to pay to hold their money in a bond, they're going to look for other alternatives, an appreciating asset.
Hmm.
And matter of factly, Bitcoin this year in 2020 has been the best performing asset of any asset class, and that even includes precious metals like gold and silver.
Hmm.
I can't remember where that source came from, but I'm pretty sure it's there or thereabouts. But I think that the difference now between other recessions and now is that number one, back in 1929, it was just a stock market crash. This time, everything, unlike 2008, where we feel that we didn't learn the lessons, we just kept the can being kicked down the road.
Hmm.
Now, everything is in a bubble, or should that be almost everything is in a bubble, with the exception of cryptocurrency and precious metals and commodities. So people are going to gravitate towards that and catch on and saying, hey, let's put everything we have, all the equity into crypto because, that seems to be the money of the future. And when you have webinars being hosted by the Bank of England on how to manage cryptocurrency,
Hmm.
if that's not telling you something, then I don't know what is. So make of that what you will. And this is not going to go away, not whatsoever. It's like everyone's who's in the know essentially, and telling you that this is, or rather, this is representative of being the greatest wealth transfer since World War II. But I'd
Hmm.
go one further, saying it's the greatest wealth transfer in history.
Yeah.
When I say things like that, I get so much grief on social media saying, "Oh, you're a sheeple. You don't know what you're talking about." I've even had people block me for saying, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
So, but you can only do what you can.
Hmm. Yeah, well, it's really interesting. You covered a lot of topics there, and one that I want to point out was about the bubble. And I've seen this news come out saying that Bitcoin's a bubble and it's going to pop, partially because it goes up really quickly and it also goes down really quickly. But if you take a look at the market cap comparison between Bitcoin around a few hundred billion and gold being 8 trillion, and then the markets being 10 times bigger than that, I believe it was calculated out that if Bitcoin had a similar market cap to gold, it would be around $250,000, which is what one of Tim Draper's goals, his predictions for the price of Bitcoin in the coming years. So it's interesting. And I guess my next question relating to that is, do you think that for the adoption of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, it's going to take a Great Depression, like you said? And it's really interesting because people have been saying that, but it seems the last 3 months the stock markets doesn't even know what down is. It only knows up. So do you think that the stock market crashing will be a major trigger for adoption of cryptocurrencies, or is it actually more so the integration of the actual technology into businesses and showing the value behind that in the business world?
I think it'll be a little bit of both. My business partner in a previous interview mentioned that something like a Libra is needed. Regardless of what you might think of it, people need a gateway point. People need an entry point to get into something like a cryptocurrency, because the thing, for me, all the components are there. The only thing missing right now, and it's a very, very important one, is that there are not enough people that can not talk down to, but talk on a level that's easy to understand. For me, there are too many developers and technicians who are getting up on stage at events and talking about their projects. And for someone who's not a developer, I haven't the foggiest. I couldn't put a blockchain together for you. I'm not that. And I'm sure many others wouldn't either. So I think that's where we're, missing that vital piece of the puzzle. But relating back to where people can use it in a time of a Great Depression, I think for me, wallets are easy to download onto your phone, whereas gold and silver in a crisis may not be. And the damning evidence of that is go and find a jeweler that's open right now. Find me one. Or find me a jeweler online that will deliver your gold or silver in less than a week. I mean, like, for crying out loud, I bought some cheese curds and it took me 2 weeks to get here. How long would it take for gold to get here? Do you know what I mean? So, I think, in all seriousness, that with gold and silver, like cryptocurrencies, to kind of be of benefit in a crisis, I think there has to be, first of all, the amount of people that can use them or accept them. But I think that's also important too.
Definitely. And the education part that you mentioned is obviously super important. And I've noticed a little bit of that trend as well, where there's a lot of great technology and the developers that build it are geniuses. But conveying that to somebody who doesn't understand technology is very tough. And you really need to get to the core value proposition and the core benefits, and let the technology sit on the back end where it does its work. But focusing on that, and I guess that's part of where Blockchain Blueprint comes in. Can you talk a little bit about, as a consultancy, how are you helping blockchain and crypto companies get the word out there in a more non-technical way?
Sure. So basically, we started out as an online course, but I felt like it didn't make sense. So we decided to give away our content for free, everything on it. We thought there was much better value in just give it away all on YouTube, and turn it into a consultancy. But the question we asked ourselves was, what kind of consultancy should we be? So we narrowed down a few sectors that we felt made sense, and the one that came up the most was fintech. So we decided to approach SME businesses, that's small and medium-sized businesses, because if we started to go to the big corps who adopted it and didn't know who we were, they'd laugh us out of the buildings. So, to make our lives easier, we decided to approach, just startup businesses that either are involved with fintech or have some sort of tenuous indirect link with it. So what we did was that we began to do our research into companies of people who might not necessarily have entered their first funding round, even so, they're very much in the infancy. They're just the very, very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we, got into conversations, and, we're still really, this is all from a relatively kind of, I'm talking the last few months this has happened. This is very, very new, and we're still it's still very early doors for us. So we're learning ourselves how consultancy works within blockchain, and you just, I feel, kind of learn as you go along and learn valuable lessons along the way in a very short space of time. So I've enjoyed doing this, and just as much as that, I've enjoyed doing the YouTube thing as well, because that's really opened my eyes unexpectedly as well, because suddenly, you get a video that does well, or a few that do well, and think, hey, there might be something in this, so we can use this in adjacent to the consultancy, and perhaps even, this works absolutely in our favor, and it's absolutely beneficial. So it also builds, more than anything else right now, social proof. And, when people start knowing who you are, you eventually get messages out of the blue saying, we'd like to, work with you. You did such a great job with the interview. And that's happened a couple of times. Based off interview we did, we've had discovery calls off that. So, I like to think my journalism did the trick. And yeah, it's just what I do. So I like to think I'm good at what I do, and I've done my job well.
Definitely, and I
agree. Cheated a little bit.
Yeah, your content is professional, and it looks really great. And we're running out of time, but for the viewers, how can they find the blockchain Blueprint podcast, and also learn more about your services and get involved with your community?
So our YouTube channel, it's Blockchain Blueprint on YouTube. On Twitter, we're at Blockchain Blue P, Instagram at Blockchain Blueprint, and at Facebook as well, and LinkedIn. We're pretty much in all the socials. So yeah, very simple. We're also building our website at the moment. It's still there, but we're restructuring it, so it's more in line with what we do in terms of a consultancy rather than an online course.
Awesome. Thanks, Yousif. I will leave the links in the description box below for the viewers. That's all the time that we have, but I really appreciate you coming on to speak about Bitcoin and Blockchain Blueprint. Let's follow up in the near future.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Ashton.